Why is a tech millionaire hiding in an RV, secretly watching a single mother struggle to cook dinner for her daughter? Hannah Mitchell, a waitress in a small town, swallows her tears as she prepares a meager meal for 6-year-old Ava, her heart heavy with dreams beyond her reach. A few feet away, Caleb Reynolds broken millionaire watches from his lavish RV, yearning for a family he has never had. Could one small gesture change their lives forever? All right, my dear viewers, get ready for a story that will leave you in awe. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always exciting to see people joining us from all around the world. The Chevy came to a halt, its engine fading after a long day on the road. Hannah Mitchell pressed her forehead against the steering wheel for a few moments, granting herself a rare moment of stillness. She didn't sigh, but her eyes said it all. Exhaustion, anxiety, and something aged yet resilient, as if she had learned to survive without miracles. Ava jumped out of the car, her dusty shoes thudding softly on the hard ground. In her hand was a worn picture book, her closest companion on their aimless journeys. "Mom, what's for dinner tonight?" Her gentle but eager voice called, not because she expected much, but because she trusted her mother, would always find something for them. Hannah turned and forced a smile the kind grown-ups use when choices are scarce. "Let's see what treasure we've got today." She rummaged in the small cooler behind the driver's seat. A few stale bread slices, an unopened can of black beans, and a soft, ripe tomato. Not enough to call a feast, but enough to call survival. She lit a mini gas stove, adjusted the flame, and began to cook. Her movements were familiar, neither rushed nor resentful, as though with each bean she flipped, Hannah tried to seed a bit of hope. Ava sat nearby, hugging her pillow, and recited a passage she'd read 100 times. She didn't need a response only to know her mother was listening, still there. Not far off, in a silver RV, Caleb Reynolds watched in silence. He spoke no word, made no move, simply sat with his cold coffee, eyes fixed on the woman cooking and the child by her side. He didn't know their names or where they came from, but there was something in the way they lived that he couldn't turn away from. Caleb once had a meteoric reputation in the startup world. Figure investors flocked to at a handshake. He had everything: fame, money, love, until betrayal knocked, and it all crumbled in one night. Now, amid the comforts of his expensive RV, he felt emptier than ever. Then, in that unspoken moment, Ava looked up and asked, "Mom, do you think there'll be a shooting star tonight?" Hannah didn't look away from the pan, her hands steady as she stirred the beans, yet her voice was unexpectedly gentle. "If you wish for one, I bet there will be." A simple reply, but it made Caleb sit up straight. Something in her words choked him. Perhaps because they stood in stark contrast to the world he knew: numbers, financial reports, closed-door meetings, and promises never kept. He hadn't intended to stare, but Ava's clear laughter, Hannah's calm routine, and the way mother and daughter huddled around their modest dinner, none of it felt like pity or mere curiosity. It felt as if he were being drawn toward something genuine, uncalculated, and unselfish. In that moment, Caleb was no longer a man fleeing from his past. He was someone being guided. Though he didn't know where he would go, for the first time in a long while he allowed himself to listen. Hannah carefully sliced the soft, ripe tomato, placing each piece deftly on a slice of bread she'd toasted crisp in the pan. The aroma of lightly sautéed black beans wafted up, but with one taste she realized something was missing. She frowned, turned back to the cooler, and searched. Nothing. The last container of salt had run out last night. Hannah exhaled and glanced at Ava, who sat drawing with her fingertip in the dust on the table surface. Her gaze then drifted toward the silver RV parked nearby. Hesitation flickered across Hannah's face, but in this situation, she couldn't let Ava's small hope become a bland dinner. "Stay here with me, okay, sweetie?" Hannah said softly, intending to walk over and borrow some salt herself. But before she could move, Ava sprang to her feet and skipped toward the RV. "I'll ask for salt for you," the girl declared, her voice full of conviction as if on a grand mission. Before Hannah could call after her, Ava rapped gently on the RV's door, each tap echoing in the quiet dusk. Inside, Caleb jolted, knocking his coffee cup askew. The ceramic clink against the table was enough to rouse him from his vague thoughts. A child? Here? He stood and cracked the door open, peering down. Ava looked up, her big round eyes shining in the sunset glow. No fear, no hesitation. "I'm sorry to bother you, but my mom needs some salt for dinner. Do you have any?" Caleb blinked. Her straightforward sweetness made him momentarily unsure how to respond. Then he nodded slightly. Yes, I have some." His voice was horsey, hadn't spoken much in recent weeks. He turned away to fetch the salt from the kitchenette. But before he could return, Ava had seized his hand with her tiny fingers. "Come with me, Mom makes great bread," she insisted, excitement in her voice as though announcing a banquet. Caleb froze. It had been ages since he'd been part of any family meal, no laughter, no home-cooked aromas. Yet something in the girl's eye so trusting and bridled him to follow without a second thought. Hannah spun around at the sight of Ava leading a stranger. Her heart leapt. "Ava!" she called in alarm. "Sorry, I didn't expect you to." She paused, taking in the man before her. Tall, lean, yet solid, salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed, wearing a simple navy sweater. Though unadorned, he exuded a calm strength, as if he'd weathered storms beyond what his serene demeanor suggested. Caleb held out the salt shaker, offering it gently. "It's okay. I'm Caleb. I guess she wants you to try her bread." A brief hush followed. Hannah flushed, feeling both awkward and relieved. "I'm Hannah," she replied, then gestured to the table. "If you don't mind some bean toast, please have a seat." Caleb sat down. Ava quickly poured water from a plastic bottle into 2 small cups. "I saw a bird this morning," she began, chirping eagerly. "It had blue feathers and flew around that tree." Caleb nodded, listening as if the bird story were the most fascinating thing he'd heard all month. Bean toast, nothing luxurious, but it tasted real. The beans' slight char, the tangy sweet tomato, and just enough salt made the meal feel hearty. No one spoke much about the food, but everyone finished their portion. They didn't ask about each other's pasts. No one mentioned why they were at this roadside stop. Only Ava continued to chat, giggling when Caleb dropped a tomato slice and hurriedly scooped it up like an embarrassed child. And in that moment, Hannah realized this man was unlike any hurried, detached diner customer she'd ever served. He carried a quiet authenticity, sad, yet not off-putting. Just a simple dinner. But for Caleb, it was the first time in months he hadn't eaten alone. And for Hannah, it was the first time she'd seen Ava smile without having to force it. Perhaps every change starts with asking for a pinch of salt. Hannah never expected to see Caleb again after that evening. Yet, as if by deliberate coincidence, the silver RV reappeared at the next rest stop, and then at the one after that. From Page to Kanab, every time she and Ava pulled over to rest, Caleb was there, sometimes already parked, sometimes arriving hours later. No one asked why, but every exchanged glance silently acknowledged something, however fragile, was forming between 3 strangers. At first, Hannah kept her distance. She was used to people blowing through her life like desert wind, arriving unexpectedly and leaving nothing but dust. But then, when her truck's battery died on a deserted stretch of road, Caleb was the first to arrive, holding jumper cables and calm eyes. He didn't ask questions, she simply knelt, carefully connected the cables, and smiled softly when the engine roared back to life. "Where did you learn to do this?" Hannah asked, wiping oil from her hands. Caleb shrugged. "From the times I didn't want to call for a tow." That night, under a sliver of silver moonlight, Ava taught Caleb how to fold paper airplanes. He was awkward, laughing when his creases misaligned, and Ava giggled whenever he dropped his plane before launching it. In that moment, their laughter rang out like a rare melody Hannah had almost forgotten existed, a sound untouched by worry. Gradually, Hannah opened up. Not much, but enough for Caleb to learn she once dreamed of owning a small bakery where the scent of butter and cinnamon filled the mornings, and customers called her by name instead of Table 3's server. She spoke of late-night shifts at a roadside diner, where tips were scarce. And once, as she added firewood to a campfire, she murmured that Ava's father had left when she was 4 months pregnant. With no word, she said, eyes on the flickering flames. He left a note saying he wasn't ready to be a father. Caleb was silent for a long moment. He looked at her, no pity, no pretense of understanding, just presence. And for Hannah, that was enough. Caleb, however, shared little about himself. "I'm just taking a break," he would reply whenever Hannah asked about his work or why he was driving an RV alone. But she began to notice small details: the Mont Blanc pen he used to jot down Ava's made-up formulas, the way he reprogrammed her truck's GPS with a few skilled taps, and the fleeting sadness in his eyes when Ava casually asked, "Uncle, do you have a wife?" One night, after Ava had fallen asleep in the truck, Hannah and Caleb sat by the fire. The scent of burning wood filled the cool desert air. Caleb's voice was low and hoarse, as if these words had been held in his chest too long. "I used to think success was everything, that if I worked hard enough, earned enough, built enough, everything would fall into place." He looked into the flames. "But then I lost the things that mattered most, and I realized I never really lived." Hannah didn't ask, "Who did you lose?" or "What happened?" Instead, she simply nodded and handed him another dry branch. She knew some wounds need no dissection, just someone nearby when they ache. The next morning, at a small gas station in Kanab, while Ava browsed candy at the counter, Hannah walked into the convenience store. She spotted an old newspaper tucked on a lower shelf. A bold headline screamed, "Tech Millionaire, Caleb Reynolds abandons startup after bankruptcy." The accompanying photo was unmistakable Caleb in a light gray suit, standing on a tech conference stage. The article detailed the fall of a once-celebrated genius. A $1 million startup collapsed, a trusted partner's betrayal, ensuing lawsuits, and then a vanishing act. The paper trembled in Hannah's hand. She stepped outside, eyes searching for Caleb. He was laughing crouched beside Ava as they competed to skip flat stones across the hard ground. Sunset light slanted across his shoulders, tracing a pale gold outline around his still figure. And Hannah, standing there, felt her heart twist. What was he running from? Or what was he trying to rediscover? A secret had just been revealed. Yet she felt no anger, only sorrow, because she knew that feeling all too well, when one must leave themselves behind just to keep living. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or grab a drink, then continue following the story. More surprises await. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the tale, so we know you're still with us. No one plans for life's most important moments. They often arrive unexpectedly, in the simplest forms: a glance, a gesture, or a paper kite soaring above the valley. Ava's 7th birthday celebration was Caleb's idea. He didn't warn them in advance. He simply texted Hannah that morning, "Bring her to the West Cliff at Zion by 5 p.m. Trust me." When Hannah took Ava's hand and led her to the cliff's edge, the sunset was painting the sky in fiery reds. On the dry ground lay a picnic blanket, a plate of homemade butter cookies neatly arranged on a tin platter, and a sky-blue paper kite scrawled with, "Fly high like your dreams." Ava squealed with delight. She ran to hug Caleb, calling him Uncle Caleb. For the first time then, snatched the kite string and raced off into the wind, her laughter echoing across the canyon. Caleb watched, a dusting of cookie flour still on his hands, his eyes reflecting a pure joy he hadn't felt in ages. Hannah stood quietly. She had nothing to say, but as the long shadows of sunset stretched across her face, Caleb saw tears in her eyes. Not sadness, but gratitude, and for the first time, trust. But joy, like all beautiful things, proved fragile. The next day, at a small rest stop near Mount Carmel, a man appeared with a camera and a familiar face. Hannah was pumping gas when she saw him discreetly photographing the silver RV. His gaze tracked Caleb like a predator. It was obvious was a reporter from San Diego. He said little, leaving only. His hideout won't remain a secret for long. Hannah tightened her grip on the pump. She already knew Caleb wasn't anonymous, but faced with the truth in the form of media intrusion, scandal, and past mistakes, an old anxiety surged up. She didn't fear Caleb. She feared what would happen if he disappeared again. That night, after Ava was asleep, Hannah faced Caleb by the campfire. Her voice was low but steady. "Who are you, Caleb? A runaway millionaire, just the man who flew a kite for my daughter." Caleb did not answer immediately. The flickering flames revealed his exhaustion, not physical, but the weight of invisible burdens he'd carried for years. "I am both," he said. "I once had everything: money, fame, a beachfront penthouse and a small family. His voice cracked. Until one afternoon, an accident happened. My wife and son, none survived. Hannah covered her mouth, stunned. I couldn't go on, Caleb continued, eyes reddened. I'm not running from journalists, Hannah. I'm running from myself, from the man who lost what mattered most, chasing an empty dream. Silence enveloped them only, the crackle of wood punctuated the unspoken questions neither dared voice. The next morning, Caleb received a call from his former lawyer. Bad news. His last company teetered on the brink of bankruptcy. He had one chance to restructure, but he had to return immediately. Hundreds of employees are waiting on your decision, Caleb. If you don't step up, they lose everything. Caleb hung up, sitting motionless in the RV. Hannah, standing just outside the truck door, had heard it all. She knew what was coming and her heart ached, not anger at him, but fear that this choice might take him away from her forever. That evening, when he approached with sorrow in his eyes, she did not wait for him to speak. You're leaving, aren't you? Her voice was soft, yet her heart felt like it was breaking. Caleb nodded. I don't want to, but I must. If there's any chance to fix what I've broken, I have to try. Hannah lowered her head, clenching his jacket lapel. She had been left behind once. Ava had been promised, then disappointed. She wasn't sure she had the strength to endure it again. And what about us? She asked. Caleb stepped closer, placing his hand over hers. If you'll have me, he said, voice trembling, I'll come back. Not for fame, but for you, for Ava, because I refuse to lose again. In Hannah's eyes, there was anger, there was pain. But there was also something else, a fragile spark of hope, like a wisp of smoke, but enough for her to nod. That night, Ava slept soundly in her mother's arms, unaware that the world around her faced a turning point, a crossroads where a man had to choose between his past and the most precious gift he'd just found. Caleb stood before them, his gaze pleading even as his voice remained calm. We can start over, Hannah. In a new town. I have the experience, the connections. I can help you open that bakery, a peaceful place for the three of us. No more running. Hannah did not answer at once. A gentle breeze swept across the empty lot where they'd parked, and Ava was absorbed in flying her paper kite by a distant tree. A peaceful scene, too peaceful, making Hannah's heart ache. Caleb, she said, her voice catching, I can't. He squeezed her hand lightly, his expression momentarily uncertain. I can't risk Ava's future for a dream, she continued. She's already lost a father. I won't let her attach to someone again, only to lose them. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. He understood. He couldn't blame Hannah for her caution, but his own heart tore as though someone had ripped it apart. He wanted to say, I won't leave, but the truth was she had left before, let go, and whatever the reason, that remained an unhealed wound. When the moment to part came, no one spoke much. Only Ava, her eyes red and tears streaming, wrapped her arms tightly around Caleb. She sobbed in broken hiccups. Please don't go. Caleb knelt and held her close. He couldn't promise what he might not keep. Instead, he handed her the little paper, kite, the very kite they'd first folded together. I will always remember you, Ava, he said, hand over his heart. And as long as the wind blows, the kite will fly, just like my love for you and your mother. Hannah stood silent. When Caleb walked away without looking back, she turned her face to the wind, letting the tears she'd staved off finally fall. In the weeks that followed, the road felt longer and lonelier. Hannah returned to her old routine, driving, waiting tables at roadside diners, stretching every dollar so the two of them could keep going. But no matter how busy she stayed, she couldn't shake the hollow emptiness inside. Ava changed. She no longer spoke much. She carried the paper kite everywhere, glancing skyward now and then as if searching for something. Sometimes Hannah found her whispering to the wind, as though talking to someone no longer there. One day, stopping in Flagstaff, Arizona, Hannah went into a convenience store at a small gas station. When she returned to the truck, her eyes fell on the rusty mailbox at the far end of the loaten old thing no one ever noticed. But this time, something drew her close. Inside the mailbox, among crumpled flyers and faded ads, was a cream-colored envelope. No address, no stamp, only a single line in soft handwriting, for Ava. Hannah's heart pounded. Her hand trembled as she opened it. Inside was a drawing of a paper airplane soaring against a blue sky, and beneath it 3 figures: a salt and pepper-haired man, a woman with her hair in a bun, and a little girl holding a kite. Accompanying it was a line of text. "Still flying, Ava. Find me if you and your mother are ready." Hannah stood frozen. She remembered Caleb's eyes that final night, the tenderness he showed Ava, the times he folded kites late into the night just to hear her laugh. She also remembered how she once believed, if only for a fleeting moment, that happiness was possible if one had the courage. Ava ran up, saw the note, then looked at her mother with eyes brightening in a way Hannah hadn't seen in weeks. "Mom, Uncle Caleb still remembers us." Hannah said nothing. She knelt, stroked her daughter's hair, her heart torn between fear and a growing hope. Perhaps she had let fear overpower love. Perhaps it was time to ask herself, am I ready to fly once more? And in the silent afternoon air of Flagstaff, with a gentle breeze stirring around them, the paper kite lifted again, not by the wind, but by hope. Some journeys begin not with a plan, but with a moment of letting go of fear. Hannah spent weeks hiding behind work and the excuse of giving Ava stability, but deep down she knew something was missing, not a man, but someone who would make her believe that love doesn't always mean loss. Caleb's letter, sketching a simple yet hopeful world, had awakened in her the courage she'd long buried, to believe once more. One morning, with no more hesitation, Hannah sold her faithful old Chevy. With the small proceeds and a heartfelt favor, she borrowed an SUV from a friend at the diner where she once worked. On the road to Sedona, Arizona, where Caleb had said he wanted to find himself again, Ava sat in the back seat clutching her paper kite, her eyes glued to the window. The landscape shifted to the fiery red of sandstone. And then, as if destiny guided them, they pulled into a rest stop nestled under a towering cliff end. There it was, the silver RV, silent as part of the scenery. Caleb sat by a small campfire, his worn flannel sagging at the shoulders, his gaze distant and empty, as if waiting for something he couldn't name. Ava ran forward like a gust of wind and threw her arms around him from behind. "You're here!" she cried out, trembling with joy. Caleb turned, and in that moment, seeing her face the face he'd thought only he'd meet again in memory, his heart shattered with emotion. He saw Hannah approaching slowly, her defense lowered, her eyes full of longing. "I was wrong, Caleb," she said, her voice choked with feeling. "I thought protecting Ava was enough, but I forgot that sometimes love itself is the best protection. I didn't choose you for a dream, Caleb. I chose you for who you truly are." Caleb said nothing. Tears ran down his cheeks as he drew them both into a tight embrace. That hug wasn't an ending, but the beginning of something new, something that should have started long ago. "I refuse to go back to the company," he whispered to Hannah's ear. "I can't let my past dictate my present any longer. I want to live, truly live with you and with Ava." A year later, in a quiet corner of Sedona, where travelers pause after exploring, a bakery flourished with the scent of butter and cinnamon. The window bore a hand-carved sign. Wind and Crumbs Bakery, a name Ava had chosen. Caleb stood behind the counter brewing coffee, sleeves rolled up, his salt and pepper hair making his smile all the warmer. Hannah worked at the oven, pulling out a batch of golden cookies, flour dusting her cheeks but her eyes soft with tenderness. And Ava, in her polka-dot apron, sketched chalk art on the wall, her world, no longer hiding anything. The bakery never filled with crowds. They were not wealthy. But in every pastry was a piece of their hearts warm, sincere, and whole. At night, under Sedona's starry sky, Hannah sat on the doorstep watching Caleb and Ava chase each other on the small lawn behind the shop. Their laughter rippled like gentle waves through her past years. She placed her hand over her heart. Feeling its steady, strong beat for the first time in years, it no longer pained her. Only love truly heals. And sometimes what we need isn't answers, but someone willing to journey with us to the end. Thank you for following Hannah, Caleb, and Ava's story to its final moments. If this tale touched your heart, please subscribe so you can join us on more moving journeys. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts, what resonated most with you, or have you experienced something similar? Don't forget to share this video with friends and loved ones across the US who cherish stories of love, forgiveness, and healing. We'd love to know where and when you're watching quiet evenings in California, Sunday mornings in Texas, or a cozy cafe in New York. Every comment inspires our next chapters. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in our next stories.